welcome back. Now, if you've been on X lately, and let's be honest, we all pop in there every now and then for some form of detoxing or just to see what people are saying. You probably may have seen the post in which Scanty of KSS Studio spoke about Interco and said that Interco is not serving its purpose. Now, we all know what happened to Scanty after that. Cue the outrage. People throwing out names of their favorite athletes from their school and the most popular athletes from their time and making a point about why they think Interco is still relevant. And, well, to all intents and purposes, I think Scanty deserved some of the things that he was getting. But the question we have to ask, and before we cancel Scanty, the point to really ask is to look at the facts. Is Interco really working? Is it serving its purpose? Or is it just a nostalgic system that is now running on fumes and it's not as productive as it possibly can? Here on VR today, I want to take a deep dive into Interco. Now, there's the legacy of Interco, and I won't mention names because it's such a long list of athletes who have come out of the Interco system, who have made it to the national level. I won't go into football because there are so many footballers, some of our greatest footballers, who trace their roots back to the Interco system and playing for one school or the other. So there's a legacy to defend. When you look at our national athletics team now, people like Azamatia, people who first got their break at Interco level, and there are several other athletes who have. So indeed, there's a case to be made for a production line in our athletics over the years. And there's a case for the outrage against Scanty for the comments he made about the Interco. But he also asked a very important question. That, do you remember what happened to your school's biggest athlete, to the most famous athletes who used to get all the adoration of the girls at Interco? I think it's an important question that we have to look at. Imagine you participated in the recently ended Ashanti Regional Zonals or even a Super Zonal competition. And your face is all over social media. And we've seen people like Gaza, who have now become very popular, the young lady, for her exploits and the expression of her confidence. But what happens after the 24 hours to 1 week you spend on social media, where you are on the posts of many bloggers and you are on the post of many people who go on X to post? What happens afterwards? If you fast forward to 3 years from now, what will happen to some of these athletes? Now, the difficulty is that, statistics are hard to come by. But the truth is that a lot of these athletes simply fade into oblivion. They become has-beens, once famous at SS. But then what happens? People I met at the university who used to be famous athletes, and by university time, well, they are no longer engaged in athletics. And there's a reason for this. So let me break down some of the reasons. One of the most important reasons is what I call the silo system. Interco is the property of the Ghana Education System, GES. GES organizes this, through their network of schools, through the network of PE masters and other supervisors who help put together the Interco. They are the ones who control the children in school. They are the ones who determine the school calendar. The Ministry of Sports, and specifically the Ghana Athletics Association, and these federations who coordinate the other sports, are usually very much on the periphery. And this is where the issue comes in, because the people who are the technical supervisors at the senior level, at the national level, tend to become almost uninvited guests when it comes to the GES organization of the school sports and the Interco. So what happens? You have a calendar for athletics across the school system that does not take cognizance of, for instance, what the national athletics calendar might be. That is not done in collaboration with what the national athletics calendar might be. So you have two systems. You have the school system and you have the national sports system. And these are all operating separately and do not exactly collaborate well with each other. So then what happens? There's a gap. There's a gap between what happens on the GES front and what happens on the national front. Let me give you a typical example. Last year, when the regionals were held, yes, the students stand up and performed. But if you compare the times that they made at the regional levels to what happened at the super zonals level, there was a significant variation and there was a drop off in their performance. Now, why was that the case? And how did that happen? Well, it's quite easily the fact that when students finish the regular school calendar, because there's no camping necessarily to always prepare you for the regional level, and you go home before you come for the short-term camping before, students don't train. Now, if a person comes from a far-flung place in some rural community and they go there, how do they train? Where are the tartan tracks for them to train? Of course, there's a national deficit in the sense that we do not have a lot of infrastructure. But when a person goes to the rural areas, they do not train, they have no technical supervision, they just sit there, and when it's almost time for the regionals, we say, it's almost time for the regionals, bring your athletes. These athletes will come, but there's no progressive improvement in their performances. So if you're an athlete in a rural community, God help you during the holidays, because you will not have access to training facilities, whilst children and young people in Europe and the US are probably training in proper facilities or are with some training club. And let's talk about pressure. Parents take their children to school so that at the end of the day, they can get good careers and good jobs, be able to take care of themselves, perhaps be able to take care of their parents themselves. So sometimes it becomes a matter of bread and butter. The question they will ask you, is this athletics that you say you want to do all the way? How will it pay your bills? And how will it take care of you? And these are existential questions that have to be answered. And for many athletes, it comes down to having to make a choice between your bread and butter and what looks realistically like a prospect that can feed you in future and following a pipe dream. And because the structure for the support of our sports is not so well developed and does not offer the assurance, the comfort, and the safety net for a person to say, I can become a professional sports athlete in Ghana and still be able to have my daily bread. A lot of athletes, and you bear with me, by the time they get to tertiary level or anything higher, decide that, you know what, at the end of the day, let me do the course that puts food on my table and stop following this athletics. And before you know what's happening, is the end of their career. Very similar to that is the fact that even at this level, injuries are not always properly treated, not properly diagnosed. So there are several athletes who had minor niggling injuries at SS level. Injuries that could have been treated by experts, again, because of the silo system and the fact that there isn't a lack of collaboration going on. You get normal treatment, you get the para, you get deep heat or deep freeze or some other thing, diclo used on you, and that's the end of the situation. But most of the time, they would have needed more professional help, which is not given. So a lot of athletes have had their athletics career. Indeed, footballers have had their football careers, and because of treatable injuries they may have sustained at this level. I spoke about bread and butter and the job. And many years ago, athletics flourished in Ghana, and we had athletes competing at the highest level, winning medals at the Commonwealth Games and other international championships, primarily because the safety of employment was taken up by the security services. And because we had the CESA Games, which was the games that took place between the security services, there was an avenue for the security services to recruit these athletes. Times have changed. CESA has been dead for almost a decade or probably more. And there's no longer that motivation. So a person might be good in sports, even if they were recruited because of sports to go into the security services. As somebody recently intimated to me, you would go, for instance, into the military, and you would have to focus on the core job of being a military person to the extent that it won't be long before your sporting prowess are lost. So the absence of the CESA Games has created a big chasm, a big gap, and has affected and appended the natural progression of people who have athletic skills into the security services, which then becomes a safety net, and you get a pay at the end of the month, but then you can also compete even at the national level. Then there's the issue of competitions. Between SS and maybe when you get into the Ghana University Sports Association, which is GUSA, there are hardly ever any consistent events taking place across the country. Now we have a Mundo track at the University of Ghana, but how many events take place there? In Kumasi, they don't have a world standard track, but still there's a fan base. If I told you that students paid 20 cedis to enter the Kumasi Stadium for the Super Zonals, and yet the Zonals and Super Zonals, and yet they park the stadium, you would not believe it. There's a fan base in Kumasi for it. but there aren't enough competition out of the school system and out of the occasional competition that maybe the Ghana Athletics Association might organize. So what are the competitions that will keep the athletes busy? And this becomes literally a huge hamstring for a lot of these students, and it becomes try your luck. So after a while, you get tired of the whole thing and you just move on with your life. So at this stage, one may ask, was Scanty right? Well, not entirely, because to claim that Interco has not served this purpose is a very big statement to make. Because Interco is also our biggest scouting ground. It's that festival where the best students in sport, and especially in athletics in this case, are displayed. So without Interco, there would never have been a talent pool in the first place. But it appears to me that Interco is serving its purpose accidentally. And our sentimental attachment to it is born out of what we have experienced in the past. And so those who get through not by design necessarily, by some accident. And so if you are not one of those who get privileged enough to get a scholarship to go to an American university to consider your athletics stream, Interco becomes a rite of passage that ends up in normality, with you just fading into something else. We are succeeding in athletics to an extent, not because of the system, but in spite of the system. And this, on a systemic basis, cannot be something that we are proud of. So, it's obvious that Ghana has the talent. We just don't have a functioning production line that will ensure that all these talents come good. Because if they came good and there was enough investment beyond this level, in fact, within this level and beyond this level, we would have seen the success of it. Perhaps with the creation of the sports bill, something might change. But until we stop working in silos, and I'm talking Ghana Education Service, I'm talking about you, Ministry of Education, you are the mother ministry. Ministry of Sports, Athletics Federation, National Sports Authority, until we stop the silos and we find a system of collaboration that works. And I've heard that we are creating a school sports authority. I have no doubt that it might attempt to solve some of the problems. So at this stage, one may ask, was Scanty right? Not entirely. It's such a bold claim to say Interco is not serving its purpose. It is serving a purpose. It's our biggest scouting ground for sports. And it is where some athletes who would never have had the opportunity to come into national attention or the limelight get their first break. But it appears to only be serving its purpose accidentally and not by design. It seems like we are succeeding in identifying this talent in spite of the system and not because of the system. So this year we've had all sorts of names from the Kumasi Interco and from other Intercos, but what will happen to them? And it's simple. Until the Ghana Education Service, under the auspices of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Sports and its component federations, stop working in silos, and until we fix proper medical care at this stage, proper transition from being at the secondary level to being at the next level, which may be tertiary in Ghana or somewhere else, all the way to the professional level. And until we bring back the consistent routes, including employment into the security services or other sustainable ways of ensuring that a young athlete with prospects will not just fall by the wayside, but would have real prospects of becoming a national athlete, whether it's full-time or part-time. In which case we can benefit from them from the youth championships, the youth Olympics, all the way to the biggest stage, which is the Olympics and World Championship. Interco will remain brilliant, will remain filled with good vibes, and will remain a very good platform for us to reminisce about the good old days. It will remain very bright and loud and colorful, with girls and boys packing into the stadiums and doing their things. But when all that is said and done, what will be the final outcome? And to what extent would a great and proud country like Ghana, with a proud heritage of athletics, be able to return to its heydays? So if Interco is just for vibes, Charlie, then it's great. But if Interco is a pipeline that we can tap into, a rich vein that will secure the future of Ghana sports and give some young people the opportunity to assail to the levels that their talent allow them to, then Scanty will be right. Interco is not serving its purpose. So over to you, the powers that be and the people in authority. Anyway, I'm sure you laughed at that. Don't forget to subscribe, to like our content here on Yo Charlie. This is a place where you have the most authentic content and the most relevant content as well.